How would you survive Order 66? Modern Star Wars media has been giving us many interpretations of that question as we are introduced to an expanded universe where we find more Jedi that have chosen to go into hiding in order to survive the betrayal of the clones and the rise of a new empire. We're embracing the difficulty of the Dark Souls-esque Star Wars game by attempting a challenge passed down in the Jedi archives. Can you beat Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order Deathless? The obvious answer is yes, and the answer will always be yes. But I wanted to highlight my time playing Fallen Order while attempting this challenge. I don't consider myself a pro gamer by any means, but my experience against my friends tells me that I'm at least good enough to try a challenge like this one, which is something I never considered doing before. I stream this challenge as well as many other challenges on my Twitch channel, which is linked in the description below. And while you're following my Twitch channel, leave a like and subscribe to see more of my adventures made into video epics like this one in the future. I also want to acknowledge that there are different skill levels for each individual person to choose the path that works best for them. For the purposes of this challenge, there was no option for me but to play on Grandmaster difficulty, the highest difficulty level in the game, for the added bragging rights when we finally complete this challenge. The game follows the path of Cal Kestis, a former Jedi Padawan that escaped Order 66 and has found ways to blend in to avoid being hunted by the Inquisitors. Cal has adopted a life as a scrapper working for the Imperial forces on Bracca, dismantling retired ships for scrap metal. Bracca serves as a tutorial level in this game. We're first exposed to movement scaling through the level to reach the top of a Lucre Hulk, where we find the remnants of a Republic fighter. With cables breaking, us and our partner Prof start sliding down for a Sarlacc pit. Prof falls in, forcing Cal to reawaken his force abilities to slow his fall so he can land on a transport vessel, allowing us to save Prof's life. Unfortunately, our use of slow prompts the Inquisitorius to come to Bracca looking for the Force user. They place the scrappers in a firing line to prompt a Force user forward lest they execute them all. Prof buys some time with a speech, which gets him killed by the Inquisitors. Cal gives into his rage, igniting his lightsaber and attacking the second sister, which outs him as the Jedi. We're able to escape by falling onto another transit with stormtroopers as we begin to learn the combat system of the game, culminating in our first confrontation with the second sister. We're lucky that a couple of rebels save our bacon and take us to restart our Jedi training as Cal begins the process to reawaken other Force abilities that he suppressed for many years, with the goal of rebuilding the fallen Jedi Order. Now is probably a good time to explain what this challenge holds for me. As my first attempt at something like this, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. There are more difficult games than Fallen Order, but I didn't realize just how difficult this game was going to be. I grew incredibly frustrated at this game, which eventually made me take a 6-month break from playing it. During those first 12 attempts, I never reached the halfway point of the game, and one attempt even ended on Bracca, which is the tutorial area. Unfortunately, the footage of the first 12 attempts were lost to time due to the removal of Twitch VODs in the Twitch archives, and because I started my Twitch VOD channel on YouTube during that 6-month break between my 2 sets of attempts. Which is sad because I can't fully document what happened in those attempts all those years ago. Most of those attempts will be referenced from my memory of them from 3 years ago. Back to Bogano, which is lackluster. There's not really much to talk about here because we're at the beginning of the game where you're expected to learn from the experience of fighting weak creatures. We do meet up with BD1 and learn about Jedi Master Eno Cordova as we seek to follow in his footsteps to find a secret holocron located on Bogano that could help us rebuild the Jedi Order. We will also learn the wall run ability that can help us traverse the many worlds that we are going to have to explore. There are a few things to note before you leave Bogano. We haven't talked about stems yet, but we get introduced to them on Bogano. Luckily, there are stem chests throughout the game that can be opened to get additional stems, which is the only way to heal in this game. There is one located at the early stages of Bogano that gives us an additional stem for the rest of the run. It will be important to pick these up along on our journey so we actually can heal against enemies that do a lot of damage. I will probably not be talking about stems too much throughout this video, but if you are trying this challenge for yourself, I recommend finding a guide that can show you the locations of the stems, and then you should get them as early as possible because the more stems you have, the more likely it is you don't have to reset. The other issue on Bogano is dealing with the boss fight on Bogano. In this series, there are legendary creatures that you can face that are super-powered versions of some of the notable enemies on the planet. For Bogano, that means we face the giant toad, Bogdo. Ogdos are native to Bogano and are definitely the most complicated enemies that we have run into yet. Bogdo pumps that difficulty up tremendously because of its aggressiveness. Early in my attempts at this challenge, I included a rule that required me to defeat all 4 of the legendary creatures as part of the challenge after losing to most of them at least one time. Bogdo is not an exception. I would wager I lost to Bogdo at least twice. Once on accident and once more after establishing the requirement to defeat the legendary creatures. Having taken down Bogdo, we begin our quest through the galaxy to follow the path of Cordova. At this juncture, we get to choose where we go next. Typically, the main story follows the path to Zeffo, but you can choose to explore Dathomir, and that's what I did. Heading to Dathomir this early is not usually a good idea because the creatures that inhabit Dathomir are much more difficult than most things we will come across throughout our playthrough of the game, much less at this point in our journey. We are here for one reason and one reason only: to obtain the double-bladed lightsaber. The double-bladed lightsaber is a new lightsaber variant that can be switched to at any time. It deals less damage towards opponents, but has a much wider range and allows for usage of new lightsaber abilities and combos. The important piece of this destructive puzzle is the usefulness with the double-bladed stance for crowd control, which is often the problem with non-boss enemies throughout the game. Getting the stance is quite the problem. There are many Nidax, Baneback spiders, and Night Brothers to deal with on your way to the workbench, where the double-bladed lightsaber is found. As mentioned before, fighting these enemies can be quite problematic for this early in the game, but luckily we don't have to choose to fight them. Cal's Force Slow ability is actually pretty helpful for being a pacifist, which is our best way to make it through Dathomir without having to restart. I was able to run by most of the enemies without having too much trouble, so that we can secure the double-bladed lightsaber very early in our run. I did have to restart the challenge one time, attempting to get to the double-bladed lightsaber early in my attempts while I was figuring out how to get there safely. With our new toy in tow, we can head off to Zeffo to find the Tomb of Ilum. As soon as we touch down, we have access to another stem canister, and as I said before, they're really important for this game. As we are making our way into Zeffo village, we come across some stormtroopers. This is why we wanted the double-bladed lightsaber so early on, because it is a horde of enemies that we would have trouble dealing with only a single blade. I lost a run trying to fight off this many stormtroopers at once, which solidified the double-bladed stance as a requirement for my future runs. There are a few enemies that will try to ambush you as you travel, so pay attention to your surroundings on Zeffo. Taking damage on Grandmaster difficulty is extremely deadly thanks to the added modifiers to damage taken, so we really can't be bombarded with too many dinks during our runs. Getting to the tomb is pretty easy, but inside is another story. There are many puzzles in the tomb that require us to figure them out, as well as new enemies to deal with. We eventually make it to a mini-boss, the Tomb Guardian, which is a bit of a problem at this point in the game. They hit hard and we don't really have much to damage them. You can use the Skungus around the area to cause damage to the Guardian, or they can be your downfall, as I lost an attempt to a Skungus when I was on low health while fighting the Tomb Guardian. By completing the tomb, we unlock Force Push and the Scompling, which will make the game much easier. Not having Force Push is the reason the first Tomb Guardian is so difficult, because you can easily stun them by pushing their orb out of their body. There will be more Stormtroopers as we try to leave, including a Purge Trooper. They aren't too difficult to deal with, but another one of our legendary beast friends is a different story. The Rabid Yotas is a giant beast in a small arena, which makes it very challenging. I lost a run to this optional boss after choosing to accept defeating the legendary beast as part of my challenge. The main issue is that there is no real place to run, and the Yotases are challenging opponents at this level of the game. Even the generic ones that you can find outside the arena are tough at this stage in the game. The main way I dealt with Rabid Yotas was learning its pattern, which is incredibly difficult if you are learning on the fly. Luckily, Fallen Order allows an opportunity for you to practice against any enemy in the game in the training mode, which is a perfect risk-free environment to learn how to deal with many of our biggest issues. I picked up this strategy a bit earlier on in some of the runs when I had a regular Yotas surrounded by stormtroopers as part of the way to make it back to the Mantis on Zeffo. I needed some way to get past the stopping point, and I found the training to be my solution. So I continued to employ the strategy of using the training mode with most boss fights throughout the run. With 2 of 4 legendary beasts defeated, we are not quite home free yet. We have one more issue to face before we can get to the Mantis, an ATST that is trying to prevent our escape. This is a relatively easy opponent considering all the other things we've had to deal with until this point. The one thing to note is that there is a pilot for the ATST, so make sure you finish him off before you let your guard down and he ends up shooting you in the back. On Zeffo, we learn there might be something for us on Kashyyyk, so we turn our attention to the Wookiee home planet for more investigation. Because of the conflicts on Kashyyyk, we're required to find an interesting way onto the planet, involving commandeering a walker to blast through the Imperials on our way. We meet up with Saw Gerrera, the leader of the Resistance, who directs us to free some imprisoned Wookiees that may be able to help us find Wookiee Chief Tarful, which is who we are looking for. We find that there are a lot of deadly plants and even more threatening fauna roaming on Kashyyyk, including exploding bugs, giant spiders, giant flytrap plants, and pretty much any other thing that you could imagine to be a deadly animal. Before we can free the Wookiees, we have some annoying opponents. We get a look at a double-bladed Purge Trooper and a security droid, which both are decent challenges at this point in the journey. There's also a giant arena where several stormtroopers are fighting 2 Y-Shocks. Thinking it's best to avoid the situation, there is a hidden path that you can enter that is relatively peaceful, until you realize it's the den of Kashyyyk's legendary beast, the albino Y-Shock. While I did lose this fight on my first attempt, here is where I decided that the creatures needed to be included in the runs. The albino Y-Shock is probably the easiest of the beasts to defeat because of how easily you can avoid attacks from it and how easy it is to parry at this stage in the game. I assume it's the easiest beast because of how likely you are to find it compared to the other 3 beasts. After defeating the Wookiees, we'll face a large-scale fight on the roof, which would be more of an issue if we didn't have a double-bladed lightsaber and a new ability to hack droids with BD-1. The fight culminates with another ATST, which should be pretty easy this time thanks to the improvements we have. Finally, we've done all we can on Kashyyyk, and now we return to Zeffo. We're heading back to look at another tomb. We're doing a lot of backtracking here as we completed a good portion of Zeffo on our first visit, but that doesn't stop us from encountering Imperials and having a nice reunion with the Second Sister. The Second Sister has a few deadly combos, but nothing that should be too much to handle with the amount of stems and box practice we've had so far. I actually consider the Second Sister fights to be the easiest humanoid enemy in the game, mostly due to how easy it is to dodge her attacks. This is the first boss fight that I did not have to restart a run during my attempts to complete, and there was minimal training done to assist my abilities to best her. She is just that easy. After the fight, the Second Sister reveals that she is Seer's apprentice, Trilla, giving us quite a different story about how they were found out by the Empire. Trilla will continue to try and annoy us while we traverse the tomb of Mictrol. There's many tomb guardians and stormtroopers to deal with in this area, causing some minor headaches. There's a giant puzzle room in the middle of all this, with many chances to be easily caught off guard since we haven't really been doing many puzzles while there are enemies nearby. Some rooms have many enemies that will try to attack you. It's best to let the local fauna deal with the Empire as much as possible before intervening, since that saves you from having to deal with third-partying. At the end of all the puzzles is the Tomb of Mictrol. Unfortunately, there is a fight against a few waves of stormtroopers on top of the sarcophagus, which is a small area with not much room to deal with multiple enemies swinging energy swords at you. I lost a run at this point because I was not prepared to handle the situation. There's not much to note here with the rest of our trip on Zeffo. Mostly, it's just making it through camps of stormtroopers, which are pretty easy to deal with at this point, especially with our newfound force pull ability, making it easier to weed out a few of their numbers in group fights. Our biggest problem is that we can't leave. There are many bounty hunters that have come to Zeffo because of Cal and Grease, making it near impossible to leave the planet without being captured. There are ways to get around their paths using glitches and exploits, but I chose not to use those strategies while completing this challenge. During your fight with any of the bounty hunters, you will be captured and taken to Ordo Eris. Ordo Eris is a big jailbreak sequence with no real difficulty since it is completely puzzle solving. The real issue is the gauntlet of enemies in the arena. There are many ways to be killed, but you should have mastered most of these enemies while playing through the game so far. Dealing with the bounty hunter is the new challenge. Their patterns aren't too difficult to master because any 1v1 is pretty simple to deal with. At least one of my attempts ended in this arena. The Mantis will show up to save you and continue your quest to find Tarful on Kashyyyk. Making a name for ourselves on Ordo Eris, we will encounter bounty hunters randomly throughout the maps from now on. Our first fight back on Kashyyyk is a bounty hunter fight, although this time, 2 bounty hunters team up together. 1v1s are easy, but 1v-manys can be difficult. It is important to master each type of bounty hunter by this point so that we can figure out how to deal with the pairings. Most of them you can reset if you have some trouble by backing away from their areas. Tarful is in the Shadowlands, which are filled with fauna. Luckily, we know how to deal with most of them and can avoid the rest. Tarful will tell you that Cordova found answers on top of the Tree of Origin, leading to a fun scaling section of the game with occasional stormtroopers. During our climb, we will get a visit from the Ninth Sister, who has tracked us down. As you may have guessed, she is our next challenge once we get to the top of the tree. I've said before that 1v1s are pretty easy in this game, and that extends to this fight. There's a lot of room to dodge and parry the Ninth Sister to get around her assault, though I recommend focusing on your dodges. Her double-bladed phase can be a bit overbearing, but again, there's plenty of space to get around her. This boss fight caused me 0 deaths in my attempt of this challenge. Having completed Kashyyyk, we turn our attention back to Dathomir. As I mentioned in the section on getting the double-bladed saber, the enemies here are dangerous. Nidax in particular are massive problems. We can go past the workbench where we found the double-bladed lightsaber, and then find a wanderer who will explain a bit about the Night Sisters. Continuing forward gives us a less than graceful fall into the swamps. Unfortunately, runaway strats can't be used too well in the swamps due to the limited pathing. This section requires a lot of caution as ambushes are plenty. The ranged enemies can cause a bit of minor problems, but you should have learned from stormtroopers how to block shots. Making our way back through the swamp, we reach the nest of a Gorgara, a giant bat-owl hybrid. This fight is relatively straightforward, however there is a catch. There is no available training to prepare for Gorgara, so you're going to have to get in there and wing it. Learning how to deal with a new enemy often is a challenge of Fallen Order, meaning I lost an attempt to this beast. Beating Gorgara unlocks the climbing claws, allowing us to crawl out of the swamps and finally get to our destination, the Tomb of Kujet. Inside the tomb, we are faced with a vision of Jaro Tapal in Order 66. I would be remiss not to take a moment to talk about this section of the game. This is a great feature of the game, showcasing that the loss of his master during Order 66 is where the darkness lingers inside of Cal. We will see more in the next installment in Jedi Survivor that Cal has a major fear of losing his friends, which is foreshadowed here with the loss of his master, leading him to close himself off from the Force. In the aftermath of the vision, Cal faces a shade of Jaro Tapal, which he is able to snap out of, but not before breaking his lightsaber. The Wanderer will reveal himself as a former Jedi Master, Ilum and Malicos, who tries to convince Cal to side with him. However, the Night Sister returns to punish both of you with an onslaught of zombies. This section is extremely terrifying. We have no real way to defend ourselves, and we're up against the surge of Night Sisters. Ultimately, your Force abilities can aid you in returning to the Mantis safe and sound. Needing a lightsaber sends us to Ilum, the location of many trials of Jedi Padawans to find their unique lightsaber crystals. Most of the Ilum is a puzzle-solving level until we reach our Kyber crystal. Cal's crystal will snap in half, but it's not all that bad because it enables a split saber technique, which is very useful for damage output. Having spent too much time looking for the Kyber crystal allows the Imperials to descend upon the planet. There are a few tough sections, including a pair of Purge Trooper trios, mobs of security droids, and a rematch against not one, but 2 ATSTs. After defeating all of them, we're heading back to Dathomir to finally enter Kujet's tomb. We're greeted by a group of bounty hunters that pose quite an issue. An attack droid and a jetpack hunter is a tough mix. Usually we can focus on the droid first since it will take the offensive, while we're avoiding the incoming fire from its partner. With them defeated, Cal can confront the dark side by overcoming the shade of his former master, which allows us access to the tomb. There's not much in Nightmare Ruins to deal with, just a few Night Brothers and some Nidax on Grandmaster difficulty. Mirren will confront us once again, but it seems that we're able to earn her trust as we set our path to deal with Malicos. Malicos deserves a special note as my pick for Fallen Order's most difficult boss fight. He throws a lot of stuff at you, from boulders to one of his lightsabers. He's aggressive, seamlessly pairing up long combos that require precise blocking. Without a good concept of the controls of Jedi Fallen Order, you will die here. Likely multiple times. To tell you how difficult Malicos is, let me tell you a story of my first playthrough of this game. I lost to Malicos so many times that I ended up going from Jedi Master difficulty to Story Mode difficulty, the easiest mode in the game, just to beat him. Malicos broke my resolve to beat this game totally on Jedi Master during my initial run. Thankfully, I found the training mode before I reached this battle. I spent 20 minutes sparring with Malicos before taking him on for real. This time, I was able to beat him without losing the run at all. Marin decides to join us in our quest as we finally obtain the Astrium, so we can go back to Bogano to obtain the Holocron. We're getting to the climax of the story, so now's a good time to remind you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching so far. There's not much to talk about on Bogano. We have to make our way back to the vault and get the Holocron. Again, we are forced to get through a trance of Cal dealing with the effects of the dark side. We see a vision of Cal being forced to turn dark to save his younglings, which Cal shatters to return to reality. But we're not alone. Trilla has found us, and we engage in another fight with the second sister. As I mentioned earlier, Trilla is a joke. The interesting part of this fight is that I'm not fully sure Cal has recovered from his dark side urges, since he uses the forbidden Tricata lightsaber form, which involves shutting off your lightsaber to gain an advantage against your enemy. He does get punished for it since he gets overwhelmed by his psychometry ability when stealing Trilla's lightsaber. His plan backfires and he gets to witness the story of Cere and Trilla during Order 66. We see her get captured and tortured, eventually witnessing Cere embracing the dark side to escape after seeing that Trilla turned to the dark side. By the time Cal recovers, Trilla is gone and the chase is set for the final location. But first, we have to return to the Mantis. Cal and Cere reconcile their dark urges, but luckily Cere is able to figure out where Trilla is going. Reconstituting her Force abilities, Cere knights Cal, making him a Jedi Knight to show her belief in Cal's abilities to overcome the Inquisitor's fortress and secure the Holocron. Finally, we reach the end, the Fortress Inquisitorius, the last thing stopping us from opening the Holocron. This is the ultimate challenge for this run, as you are met with swarms of stormtroopers, security droids, and forced to fight them in tight corridors. You are forced to fight your way through the corridors to make your way deeper and deeper into the fortress. This area forces you to constantly be on your guard. It is easy to be overwhelmed, so we have to be careful. We can hack security droids for extra help, and we can focus our efforts on getting into 1v1s as often as possible to avoid getting wombo comboed by the onslaught of enemies. You'll be thankful for the puzzles in this level as a nice change of pace from all the combat you have to face. A couple of rooms are incredibly scary in the fortress, including a room with a control panel, an enemy rush in a room that is split by lava, and a prison block section with ridiculous amounts of blaster shots. With Cere's help, we're able to push on to the room where Trilla is waiting. This is the final encounter, the last boss, and it's probably one of the worst final bosses that we've ever encountered in video game history. We've faced Trilla many times before, so we already know how to deal with her. The main difference is she will do many unblockable moves in her later phase, which can cause a lot of damage, making it so you basically have to be at full health to have a chance to survive the hits. You have to be aware of when those moves will come out, but otherwise, she's a piece of cake. The hardest part of this fight is actually dealing with the probe droid throwing off your rhythm. This marks the end of the challenge, as all that's left is a playable cutscene with Vader as we escape the fortress and live to see another day. In total, this challenge took me 15 attempts and almost a year to complete due to a 6-month hiatus. This was a fun challenge even if it was frustrating at points. I feel like completing this challenge is proof that with enough perseverance, you can complete difficult game challenges including Jedi Fallen Order, Deathless on Grandmaster difficulty. I definitely would have had many more attempts without the training for the boss fights. It's an incredibly helpful tool that has made this challenge so much easier. Ultimately, it just saves you time. I'm glad we could abuse this mechanic in this game because we won't have it for the next one. Thanks for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you want to see these challenges live, check out the Twitch channel. If you haven't already, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. I'm looking forward to seeing what challenges come next. Feel free to let me know what you'd like to see in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm Chaos signing off. Stay safe, and as always, burn it up.